Gallagher and Lyle, I want to stay with you on Liverpool Live. It is 6 minutes past 11. It's a Wednesday. We're halfway through the working week. It's Roy Bassnett with you until 1 o'clock today. Chris Cannon has joined proceedings. Good morning to you, Chris Cannon.
Good morning, Roy Bassnett.
I'm led to believe there's a bit of a birthday celebration going on today.
Yeah, not today. A couple of days back. It
Was it?
was the 816th birthday of Liverpool.
Was it really, man?
Yeah.
Not much fanfare going on for that.
28th of August, 1207 is when King John granted the letters patent to the Steward of West Derby, creating the borough of Liverpool.
I'm surprised nobody's gone on to that. You know, when you think about it, you know, all of the things that go on, the celebration, like a Pride that's been going on, all the kind of, the festivals. Why aren't they onto that? St. John's Day.
Because it wasn't St. John's, King John.
Oh, King John, yeah.
To be fair, King John's the most hated monarch in history. Yeah. Do you know the bad guy from Robin Hood?
Is that him?
That's him.
Oh, the Sheriff of Nottingham.
No, he was in charge of the Sheriff of Nottingham.
Oh, right. Oh, I see.
Yeah, King
right,
John, the most... But to be fair, he gave us the Magna Carta.
Did he?
Yeah.
And I love them. They're some of the nicest ice creams you can get.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But, I didn't realise it was that long ago. I thought it was a relatively shorter period.
1207 it was, yeah.
But that was the Boroughs. They made it into boroughs.
Made it borough.
It wasn't Liverpool as such.
Well, no. I mean, it was called Liverpool back then.
Was it?
Lurpul. We didn't actually become a city until Queen Victoria gave us our charter in 1880. Oh. So we're very, very late. Well, kind of late coming to the party city. But, you know, next year we should promote a big party.
Yes, right. We'll take it on board. Make it your mission.
In fact, I'll tell you what, Roy, if we can't get a sponsored party, we'll just go out and have a few drinks.
That's right, okay. Not quite the celebration I was looking for. Now then, the fortunate aspect about you being here this week is I don't have to speak to you through the entire segment.
Oh, okay.
Because you are guest in hand today, aren't you?
I am indeed.
And when he originally told me, and I know they're going to be here, we go again, I've heard it so many times, I've got Mike and Bernie for you. I thought, this is going to be interesting, because they're both dead. And then I realised you're not talking about Mike and Bernie Winters.
No,
talking about somebody
at all.
else. Tell us, go on, carry on.
Mike and Bernadette Byrne. Well, okay. As you know, over the last few weeks, we've been talking about the Beatles. Yeah. Starting from then the Quarrymen, all the way up until when they became famous. We kind of dropped it there because they left Liverpool, and I'm obviously interested in the history of Liverpool. And I thought, as a nice sort of conclusion to that, also, yesterday was the end of International Beatles Week as well. Right. Okay. So it wraps up nicely. I thought I'd bring a couple of guests in who actually did know the Fab Four. Oh. And Mike and Bernie. Hello, guys.
Hello, fellas.
Hi, Chris. Hi, Roy.
Yeah. Also, not only did they know the Fab Four, but the internationally acclaimed Beatles Story. Yeah. Probably the world's most well-known Beatles exhibition. These guys set it up.
No, you didn't.
We did.
Go on.
33 years ago.
Blimey.
Yeah.
Right. Well, let's go back in the past here. Well, first of all, when did you two meet? Was it in the Cavern or something like that?
No, we met at the KD, or short for Cardoma Cafe.
Okay.
In the Cavern days, we actually didn't know each other. So I was I started work for my dad, who was in North John Street, a tailor and outfitter, down the steps in North John Street, 150 yards from the Cavern. Bernie was, as a hairdresser, was up by Lewis's Great Charlotte Street. And so we didn't know each other then, but we were both going to the Cavern at the same time, particularly for lunchtime sessions. Okay. Which were...
They were the famous...
Exciting.
Yeah, this one, the Beatles kind of... Yeah.
And they started, I think, around February 61. Maybe in 60, but I think 61. What do you think, Dad?
Probably about 61. Well, I saw the Beatles at Hambleton Hall before the Cavern.
Yeah. Bernie, tell Roy the first time you saw the Beatles.
Well, we were only about 15 at the time, I think, my friend and I. And they'd started to have groups in Liverpool, and they were playing at various places, Oral Park Ballroom, Main-Tree Institute. And there was one up in Huyton called Hambleton Hall. And we actually went to see another band. We went to see Baron's Flamingos, because he was a bit of a star in Liverpool at the time. Yeah. And this particular show was in this place that our parents had forbidden us to ever go to because it was in a rough part of the city.
You had a rebellious youth then,
we lived in Old Swan then, so it was a short bus ride from there. Anyway, we went this night, and we got to the Hamilton Hall, and it was crowded. We couldn't understand why it was so packed, and anyway, we pushed our way to the front, as we used to do, hung our coats in the ladies' cloakroom, which was the toilets and everything, and watched the show. But then sort of, Farron was on, and we were, enjoyed that. And then this other band came on that we'd never heard of, called the Beatles. And they were so different. They all had these leather coats on, cowboy boots. There was a guy standing at the back with his head down and sunglasses on. That was Stuart Sutcliffe. And we listened to them for a bit, and the girls started to push a bit more to the, push you to the front. Anyway, they carried on performing, and that was it. Once we'd seen them, the show they did, we just loved it. Anyway, we thought, we'd go and see them wherever they play after that. Anyway, as we were leaving, we went to get our coats, and unfortunately, some of the lads had been in and had a fight at the back there, wrecked the toilets, wrecked the bowls that you wash in, and my friend's coat had been stolen. So we knew we were in trouble because we'd have to admit where we'd been. So we stood outside, sort of not knowing what to do, crying and saying, how can we get home now? Jerry and the Pacemakers were on, and they said, if you wait till we packed up the gear, we'll give you a lift home, which was very kind of them,
Yeah.
So after that, we never went back to Hamilton Hall. But it is written about, I think, if you read in the books about them playing there, and lots of these sort of out-of-town clubs. Anyway, once we'd seen the Beatles, we decided we'd find out where they were playing, and we ended up going to the lunchtime sessions, which was handy for me because we both worked in the city centre. And I actually worked in a hairdressing shop in Great Charlotte Street, which was above... I know they say the first Nems was the one in Whitechapel in Liverpool, but there was a smaller one. In fact, the first one was Walton Road, but then there was a small shop just on the corner. I think it's where McDonald's is now, around that corner. And so I could get down to the cavern quite easily, 10 minutes, So we started going, and if one of us couldn't get there in time, all our friends who we'd met would get into the corner of the alcove. The cavern, was like 2-3 tunnels, and we'd sit on the left-hand side of the stage, and the first one there would save the seats of the 3. And so we used to watch the lunchtime sessions. After it was over, they'd all go to the back, and the Beatles were, really friendly, and they'd sign autographs, so they were getting a bit better known by then. One time it was Paul's birthday, and we thought, we've got a good idea. We'll make him a little doll dressed like a beetle, but like a gollywog or something, but with a beetle antennae. And we took it. We said to Paddy, who was on the door, Paddy Delaney, and we said, "Can we go in and give Paul the doll?" So we did. We said, all right, you're not supposed to go in there, but we'll let you go in and give them the doll. We handed it over proudly to Paul. And John just looked over and said, "God, you could have knitted something decent like a guitar case." Anyway, that was it. He was very sarcastic. But anyway, the band, we went out and enjoyed them, and that's how it started, really.
Wow. John was like that all the time. John was the
very quick-witted
guy, his sarcasm was very well known for everyone. Paul was the PR man, he'd come out and, "Hi, everybody," like George was the quiet one.
How did you encounter them?
Me? I started my own band when I was 16, called Mike and the Thunderbirds. And, we were pretty rubbish, as you are when you start out. There was 4 of us, and we did okay, and I always wanted to get better, and I was always working hard. And I used to go down to Butlins holiday camp for my holidays, and Rory Storm was probably one of the first professional bands in Liverpool. There's plenty of guys who said, we're professional, just meant they didn't have a job. But Rory had he had the residency 6 months at Butlins every year. He did really well. And
I used to go. Skegness, wasn't it, Mike?
Sorry,
was it Skegness?
No, Pwllheli.
Oh, Pwllheli.
He did
right.
Pwllheli the first time I saw him, and then he did 2 seasons of Pwllheli, and then Skegness the 3rd season.
Oh, right, okay.
So I'm down in Pwllheli, and I had my Elvis haircut then,
Oh, yeah.
Like, really the big.
Hey, you're not far short of it now, are you?
Tony Curtis, and Rory, they used to do a talent contest every week, for anyone who went in for it. So I'll have a go because I could sing, and so I sang a whole lot of shaking going on, which is still what I'm doing today, 60 years on. Yeah. And so Ringo backed me, which was that's great. But I got very friendly with Rory. he was my fave, you know, in the time, before the Beatles. He was probably the biggest band in Liverpool in 1960, you know, before the Beatles took over the world. But, you know, I used to go there and sing with him, and I came second in the competition to a dog act. Some hound dog. No, but it was great. So after the show, we used to go down to the beach, and the fire would be lit, and guitars would come out, and I'd be singing. So when we got back to Liverpool, you know, carried on being friendly with Rory. Ended up going to his house and knew his mum and dad. His mum and they were lovely people. He lived in a place called Stormsville. Rory, and he had a pink. Because he wanted a pink Cadillac. Well, he couldn't get a Cadillac, so he had a pink Zodiac, wasn't it?
Massive, yeah.
And he gave Bernie a lift home one night. Didn't he?
Yeah.
He won't go any further.
That's a shame. That's a shame. I was looking forward to that bit.
No, well, it didn't have a happy ending. Oh, dear.
He got in one side and Bernie got out the other side. No.
Okay. Right.
Anyway, so, but Rory, as I say, he was great. He was so friendly. And, but then... So I'm going down to the Cavern, because I'm working round the corner from the Cavern, and moving on about a year or so, I was playing at a place called Aintree Institute, another fave band club, you know, and I saw the Beatles one night. I was on one night, and then the Beatles were on the next night, and it was the night they'd just come back from Germany, like the third time, and it was almost like, oh my God. You know, look at this, look at them now. Stuart Sutcliffe had left, you know, because he stayed in Hamburg with Astrid Kircher and unfortunately had a brain hemorrhage and died there. So it was just the four of them then. But this time, they had the full leathers. They had leather trousers as well as a leather jacket. And the hair, three of them, was the haircut, you know, forward in the Beatle cut.
Yeah.
And the noise that came out of them was incredible. It was like the atomic beat, but it was just powerful, and it was like, oh my God, if anyone's going to make it in Liverpool,
it's going to be these guys.
It's going to be the Beatles. Yeah. I mean, we had 350 groups, and probably out of 30 of those groups, any of those 30 could have had recording contracts.
Yeah.
They were that good, you know. The big three, Jerry and the Pacemakers, the Blue Jeans, the Searchers, the Remo 4, all those guys in the top 30, if you like, could have had a recording and did have recording contract with different levels of success. But the Beatles, it was like, oh, they're going to make it. And it was just fortuitous that Brian Epstein was, you know, had a record shop, and somebody went into his shop at one time and asked for a record called My Bonnie. Yeah. You know, which was, they recorded in Hamburg with Tony Sheridan, and it was on, you know, a Polydor German record label. And but you used to go down, Bernie used to go down into Nems at your lunchtime, didn't you?
We did. Yeah, we didn't have the money to buy any records in those days, but not much anyway, you know. And so, you know, they had the listening booths, very different to today. You'd go and stand in and listen to a record that you like. So they used to try and encourage people to buy them, so they'd play different records throughout the day. So we used to just go down in our lunch break, stand in the booths listening to the records till we could hear them and see whether they're worth buying or saving up for, you know. And you know, you'd have 10 minutes there and then you go back to work. Anyway, Brian got wise to this, and he used to come down, and you'd just see him coming out his office at the top, and he'd point at those fingers and be going,
really?
Out.
Get out. Get out.
Out, unless you're buying something.
You got thrown out by Brian Epstein.
Well, not thrown out. Has to leave by him, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he knew we weren't going to buy it. We did buy the records in the end.
Right. So then, that being the case, we've established how you first found the Beatles. How did you first find each other?
Well, I turned professional in Christmas 1964 with another band called Them Grimbles.
Right.
And it was a six-piece band, and it wasn't a beat combo. It was in the style of Georgie Fame and the Blue Frames.
Oh, yeah.
It was slightly jazzy. You know, we had a Hammond organ, and I'd always been a Ray Charles fan. And they were doing Ray Charles and a bit of bluesy stuff, Mose Allison, quite weird, not weird, but, you know, slightly jazzy, not modern jazz, but slightly jazzy, you know, Lambert, Hendrick and Ross. And I really liked that sound. I wanted to sing in a different style than the Thunderbirds. And so I joined them Grimbles, and we went off to Germany. Came back. Oh, funny story. There were 6 of us, plus a road manager, and our vehicle, our van, was an ambulance, converted ambulance, you know. And we had one of those Michelin men on the top, you know. Grimbles, the Michelin man. And we're on our way to Germany, down to the ferry, and we just got out of Liverpool, and the wheel fell off the van.
Oh, right.
So that was the start of my professional career. But we eventually got to Germany and had a good time. So that was them Grimbles, I say, 6-piece band, and it was great, you know, and we had a good time. Until our first week in Germany, I went for my money, you know, so to the boss, the manager, and he came out with a German swear word and said, you're not a very good group.
Oh, right, okay.
You know, he said it he swore. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, no, we don't like jazz here. He said, you play Chuck Berry, Pretty Woman.
Yeah.
Then we pay you.
Right.
The next night I'm going, Pretty Woman.
Oh, yeah. Every man has his price.
Yeah, so we got paid. So that was that. So I came back to Liverpool, and our drummer was Pete Clark, who had been with the Escorts, and he'd left them, joined us, and he said to me one day, we were at the Cavern, and he said, I'm just going down to meet my girlfriend at the Cardoma, the KD, and so, do you want to come? I said, yeah, okay. So I went down, and his girlfriend was Reenie. Hi, Reenie. Mate, this is Bernie. This is Bernadette.
Oh, yeah.
Bernadette.
Sounds like the mother talking that. Bernadette, not Bernie.
Yeah, Bernadette. And I looked at her, and she looked gorgeous. She looked a bit like Bridget Bardot in those days, you know.
Has he done something to upset you? Is he making his way back here?
So he's doing his best, yeah.
So anyway, I said maybe we could meet later at the Blue Angel.
All right, yeah.
Alan Williams's club, you know, where we all used to go after the. So that's how we met, and we got going. And eventually, I was coming in so late at night. You know, I'd been playing. Then we'd go to the Blue Angel. You get home at 3-4 o'clock in the morning, back to Formby. My dad had moved out to Formby by then, and I was waking them up and getting in at 4 o'clock, and he got fed up, and so. He threw me out in the nicest possible way.
Yeah,
he was always very supportive, but he threw me out, and he said, "Michael, you know, you need to do something." So we went into town, and I found a flat in Faulkner Street, and it was owned by a friend of Brian Epstein. I think a guy called Yankel Feather, and so we had that 36 Faulkner Street. So the next time I went to Germany, I came back, and Bernie and Reenie met me at the station and said, "Oh, come and have a look at your flat."
We decorated
and what had you done?
We decorated it.
Decorated?
Yeah. And,
tell them how you decorated it.
Well, one wall was very interesting. It was when you used to cut out pieces out of magazines and newspapers and piece them all together all over the wall. So it was really interesting to read it. The other wall, we decided to paint. And unfortunately, we used gloss paint. We didn't have much idea how to paint.
On the walls?
Yes, and it was orange, purple and black, like psychedelic, all over the wall.
The whole wall.
Yeah.
And, of course, they couldn't get it off.
I don't know what they did when we left.
Oh, blimey, yeah.
Yeah, so
but
great. I just thought it was the hippie days, and it was psychedelic.
It was great. We had...
Yeah, well, just hold that thought there. We're going to take a break because there are so many questions we've got. This is fascinating. I really appreciate you coming in, folks. So more stuff coming up from Mike and Bernie. Chris is still here as well, and we are finding out about the origins of the big project that we're going to be talking about in just a few minutes' time. Right, okay. Sorry to apologise. Tina Moore coming up next. Tina Moore and Lever going to let you go here on Liverpool Live. Don't forget, a little bit later on, Kerry Williams going to be joining me on the phone to talk about show business gossip in the final hour of the show. But right now, we have Mike and Bernie Winters who are with us.
Thank you, Ben.
Sorry, Mike.
Goodbye. See you. That's it.
I
love that. I love that. I'm going to get that on my phone.
I knew I'd do it as some. Mike and Bernie Byrne, right? I'm sorry about
Thanks,
that.
Billy.
I can't, but it's right. I'm right. Composure is what's required here. So, yeah, and we are the Beatles story. We're going to come to that in a second, but just before we move on, because I feel like a marriage guidance counsellor, because I've been probing deeply into your background and everything and that. Now I'm led to believe, I hope there's no NDA here or anything like that you perhaps maybe at some point in your life had a little bit of a liaison with one of the Beatles.
Yes.
Hey, with two of the Beatles?
Not at the same time.
Oh, hang on a minute. Right, okay. Right, you've got my attention. Bernie, thanks for coming. Right, listen.
How did I win it?
Right, well, are you prepared to talk about that or not?
Depends what you ask me.
Well, I just want to know everything, basically.
Well, that's for me to know and you to wonder about.
Okay, yeah. Well, who came first on the packet on the list when you were kind of chalking them off?
Paul.
Really? Wow. And if you don't mind me asking, how did that come about?
Well, in a very funny way, really. Occasionally when we were leaving the cabin, my friends and I would walk up Matthew Street, and I don't know if you remember Church Street, you always had the bus routes all along there.
Right, yeah.
So we used to stand, they lived in a different part of Liverpool to me, and we'd sit there at different bus stops. Anyway, we were walking up one night, I think there was 3 of us or 4 of us, and Paul drove up. Behind us, he had the Green Classic then, with John. And as they drove sort of out at Matthew Street, they just said, "Do you want to lift home, girls?" So we said, "Oh yes, of course." So we all got in the car and we dropped my friends off first because they were the nearest to be dropped off. And then when we got to our house, I didn't live that far from John or Paul really. We'd moved to Chilwell by then. We lived in Old Swan originally. We'd moved to Chilwell, and of course they had Menlove Avenue and Fort Lynn Road. And so as I got out the car, or getting out the car, John just said to me, Paul will be around to pick you up tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. So I was a bit astounded, as you can imagine, and I went, well, I said, that's no good. I said, I don't finish work till 6, I won't be home till 7. He just looked at me and he said, he's not asking you to marry him.
Yeah.
So, which is a typical John comment,
Yeah.
So anyway, Paul looked at him, gave him a bit of a look as if to say, don't be stupid, and walked me to the front door, and we made arrangements for him to meet me the next night.
Right.
That was how it happened.
Oh, blimey.
So that was Paul. Oh, where did he take you?
Oh, we went to pictures.
Went to
I
pictures?
think Forum it was. The Forum was...
Tell them the story about the fire.
Oh, my God.
The fire?
Yeah, almost.
We
I'll have to turn this into a box set the way this is going in.
We used to have a coal fire in those days, and my dad was lighting the fire when he arrived to pick me up, and so I don't know if any of you remember the coal fires, but they used to hold a newspaper up to the fire too.
I do, which is amazing because I'm only 32.
Yeah. around the waist.
So anyway, I'm still not rushing to get ready upstairs, and my dad said, I need some more coal. Paul had come, and he said, will you do me a favour, lad, just hold that up while I go and get some more coal.
Right.
Anyway, Paul holds this up, and it caught fire. I don't know if you've ever done it, but it can suddenly catch fire.
All right.
It sort of went up in flames. All the bits started flying around the house. My father shot in. I can't repeat his language because it was choice, but he swore, and he said... Anyway, forever after that, he was known as the fella who nearly burnt the house down.
Right.
Anyway, Paul was a bit flustered and didn't, just couldn't happen to anybody, really. So I said, oh, come on, let's get out. And we just got out quick. But he didn't know. He was known forever after that as the fellow who nearly burned.
But you only had one night out with him, didn't you?
Well, I did, yeah.
The pictures,
yes,
yeah.
It was,
so how did George come out?
Yeah, that's
that's what we want to know.
And then we want to know which one was the best.
I've been waiting for 60 years.
Oh, here we go. Come on, Bernie, you can talk to us. It's okay.
It's right. No one's listening.
I've just got to be careful. When we came out of the pictures, we went to... they used to go to Rory Storm's house, as I said. They all used to have supper there. She was really nice, Laurie's mum. And when we got there, George was sitting there in his armchair like it was his home, sitting there with his cup of tea in front of the open fire there. And so Paul was chatting away to... I've forgotten his mum's name. Iris was away. He probably went there to meet her, to see if Iris was there. But anyway,
Iris was Laurie's
dancing.
Sister.
Yeah, she was dancing,
Gorgeous.
so she was away. Gorgeous, yes. Anyway, she was dancing somewhere, and he probably chatting away to his mum, about Iris, I imagine. So I was chatting to George. Anyway, it has been snowing outside, and when we came out of the car, Paul sort of walked ahead, and then as I went to follow him, George, for some strange reason, ran up behind me, picked me up, and he skidded on the path, and we both fell flat on our back.
Right.
And we were both laughing our heads off, really. Paul was stood at the gate looking very, you stupid pair, looking very stare. So anyway, that was my night out with Paul.
Right.
And, well, that was it, I think.
Well, then George put a note through your door.
Oh, he did. That was
the next night, didn't he? Saying,
yes.
Ring me, Bernadette.
Go on.
Please ring me. So,
Is that the note that's in the Beatles story?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. Now it all makes sense.
It's a wonder he hasn't told you. I'm a bit of a hoarder. And I
have seen all the memorabilia in there.
So you still got that?
I kept that, and I've kept all sorts of bits and pieces. I was just, I'm a bit nostalgic, and things that my mum had and the family had, and he used to say, my kids would say, "You've got to get rid of this rubbish, Mum." Anyway, I'm glad I didn't now.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, that's incredible.
That's a nice segue, that, actually, because that note is actually in the Beatles story.
In the Beatles thing, yeah, right. Well, let's talk about that then, because the Beatles story, how did it come about? I mean, obviously you've got a love of music, I get that, and you've got the background, you've got the track record in there, you've the association, perhaps maybe a natural progression. How did it come to be?
Well, at the time, in the early 80s, we had a riot, didn't we, in 1981 in Liverpool, which was very serious, and at the same time, just the year before, John Lennon had been murdered, and Liverpool, the world was shocked by that, and we were shocked by the riots. I was working for Merseymark then. I had a kind of a proper job. I was still singing. I was organising all their promotional stuff. Miss Merseymark, baby competitions, sponsored swims, things like that. So I was into all that kind of stuff. And then in 1983, Bernie saw an advert for Beatle guides in the Echo. And our kids had kind of grown up a bit by then, and she said, "Oh, I can do that." Obviously, I knew the Beatles. So she became a Beatle guide in 83. At the same time, Michael Heseltine, who worked for
Ministry of Liverpool,
the government, came to Liverpool, and he spent 3 weeks here, actually looking and seeing what was going on after a riot. We can't have riots in our major cities. And good for him. He looked at Liverpool, he looked at everything really carefully, and he went away and he came up with a plan to develop all that site on the side of the Mersey, which was derelict, into the International Garden Festival. And he looked at the Albert Dock, which was derelict, and went, this could be the Covent Garden of the North. And he with the Merseyside Development Corporation, made that happen. And so in 1984, you got the first phase of the Albert Dock built, the Edward Pavilion. International Garden Festival opened, 3.33 million people came. Beatles City opened in Seal Street, which was bought by put on by Radio City. They put it there. And also, what else? There was all kinds of stuff. 84 was a great year. The Art of the Beatles at the we had the first tall ships race here. It was a year to remember, and the sun came out. So we had a lot of visitors then. So I'm with Merseymark. I had an unlimited pass to the Garden Festival, to everywhere, and I was going there every day seeing this, and I was really excited about it. Bernie's coming home saying, "I've had Japanese today, I've had Americans on my tour," and so I got into the tourism thing as well. Moving on 2 years, I became the events manager at the Garden Festival, 1986. Bernie's still doing her tours. A guy comes along. Beatles City was struggling, and the boss of the Garden Festival that I worked for said, "Oh, you know what, we'll buy Beatles City, run it this year there, and bring it to the Garden Festival next year in 1987. I So I said, good, this is good. All this is good for Liverpool, because I want Liverpool to be popular, because all we'd had was being slagged off by the rest of the country as a dirty, a city that no one wants to visit. Yeah. Anyway, so it was all positive. So I ended up being the manager of Beatles City by a quirk of fate, because the Garden Festival where I was closing down, and the boss said, there's one job going, and I said, I'll have it. What is it? Yeah. He said, Beatles City. I said, okay. So I'm sitting in, I'm the general manager suddenly of Beatles City, not knowing what to do. So using my promotional work and my marketing skills, we tried to get as many people in as we can. It was still failing. It was losing 20 grand a week. So
wow.
Anyway,
Beatles City was
Beatles City.
Right.
Beatles City. So we took it to Dallas in Texas. Not me. I didn't pay for it, but we did a deal with South Fork Ranch. And
South
Fork Ranch, because Dallas,
yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
So they were a third partner. A place in Dallas called the West End Marketplace, like the Albert Dock, old historic district. They said, we'll give you the space on the 4th floor. So they were a third partner, and the guy who allegedly bought Beatles City was the other third partner. So right. I'm working for them.
So it's like three agencies,
three people own Beatles City, or not own, but are running Beatles City in America. Yeah. We go there. I go there. We packed, Bernie and I, and some people packed everything in Beatles City. 14 massive cases. It flew over. It went on boats. Ringo's Mini, stuff like that.
The Apple door and all that.
I arrived there on August the 7th, 100-degree heat. There was no aircon on the 4th floor, and we're getting this stuff and we're setting it up. We had 7 days to rebuild Beatles City in Dallas. And the funny thing was, Ringo's Mini, it wouldn't fit in the lift. It wouldn't. 14 Mexicans carried it up the escalator. Literally. It looked great. So we were really successful. All the major TV people came to the opening, So we had 40,000 people in 3 months.
Pete Best came, didn't he?
Unfortunately. So back in Liverpool at the time, so the tours, this is 87. Back in Liverpool, the tourism board's still doing its thing. People are doing Beatle guides. You came to America and did guided tours. In America, it's funny, because when they found out that Bernie had been out with George Harrison, they were like, and they wanted to touch her, get an autograph, sign this, sign me back, sign. It was, she was like a star, celebrity, and it was very exciting. But unfortunately, the 3 people who were running it fell out. Yeah. So by November 87, these 3 had fallen out. You're not getting the money. You're not getting the money, and Bernie had come home then. I ended up coming home Christmas Eve 1987 with no job, because I knew it was going. To cut a long story short, I go to the tourism board, tell them it's not coming back. We've got to have a Beatle exhibition, because in 1987 it is getting busier. You're touring nearly every day. It's getting busier. We've got to have a Beatle exhibition. Yes, there was Strawberry Fields, there was Penny Lane, but there was nothing else. There wasn't a lot else. The Cavern wasn't doing a lot then. So I said, the tourism chief said to me, he was fed up with me, because I was pestering him. We've got to have, and he said, do me a feasibility study. He gave me 1,500 quid. Do a feasibility study of why we should have a Beatle exhibition in Liverpool. Wow, I said, oh, really? I wonder why we'd want that. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I took the money, did this feasibility study, and then turned it into a business plan, because I said to her one day, should we do it ourselves? And she said, what do we know about setting up an exhibition? Anyway, we did it. I raised £700,000 to build it. Got partners. Unfortunately, I needed partners because I didn't have the money. Bernie wrote the story. She did the research. She did the other stuff. I had to go to Apple. And can you imagine negotiating with Apple at that time in 87? The Beatles had broken up. John had gone. So
this
Yoko,
is Apple Core we're talking
this
about.
is Apple Core, who ran the Beatles. But you had 4 separate people who all had a say in what went on in Beatle world, Beatle land. And I had to negotiate with Michael Jackson's lawyers because he had bought Northern Songs, and so we got over all these things. I mean, the funniest thing was trying to get to Apple. Neil Aspinall was then running it, but he sent Derek Taylor, his right-hand man, to interview me, to check me out, you see. Well, I had all the plans then, and also what I had was an honest-ish face and a passion for wanting to do it right, because Bernie and I didn't go into the Beatles Story expecting to make money. We wanted a wage, but we wanted this to be successful for Liverpool and the fans.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So that being I'm fascinated with this. So that being the case, you decide to do it yourself. You've got the partners in there and the location.
The location. Of course. We said, where should we do it? So we looked all over the place. We went to Matthew Street, and there was nowhere in Matthew Street. I mean, that was probably the obvious place. There was nowhere there to do it at all. And one day, Bernie came home and said, I've seen where we're going to do it. Tell Roy what happened.
Yeah, we were having a guided tour of how the Albert Dock was being developed with the other guide, a recce as we call it. And they took us down to where the tobacco warehouse was, and when we got down there, I looked at it and I thought, wow, this reminds me of the cabin. And it had the archways. It was built in the same style and the rough brick, as it were. So when I got back, I said, you've got to come down and have a look at this place and see, and it's up to you to negotiate.
So she came home and said, I've seen where the cabin's going to be. And I went, okay, let's go and have a look. And we went down. It was totally black. There were like a couple of light bulbs hanging every 100 yards, and it was like,
dusty,
oh god, this
is the tobacco warehouse
underneath
the Albert Dock one, not the
basement, the basement of the Albert Dock. So in 87 the Albert Dock wasn't finished even.
They'd only done the
they hadn't done the colonnades. They'd done the Tate was there, the Maritime. They'd moved around from the Edward Pavilion, and they had the Britannia Pavilion open, and Costa carts and things like that, But when you looked out from the Beatles Story across, there was nothing else there for miles. It was the largest, it was the biggest free car park in Liverpool. And so anyway, so we did this plan, and we got very good architects, great architects, and good designers. So between us, we I think one of the great things about Beatles Story still being open today, 33 years on, and it being the biggest, most successful in the world, is the fact that we did go to Dallas with Beatles City, and we saw the Beatles City and how that failed. And that failed in Liverpool because it was in the wrong place at the wrong time, but also it was all cases, like museum, glass cases. There was a little bit of atmosphere, but mostly glass cases with artefacts in. Lovely artefacts.
Museum,
but if you were an ordinary family out for a day out and you weren't really Beatle fans, there was nothing there to go, oh, that's exciting. So we
got to kind of Disney-fy it.
So we, Disney-fly, yeah. What we went to see, and we said we want to create what they call we called it an experience. Today they call it immersive. So we went to see Jorvik. In York, which was great. That was something that took you back in time. The London Dungeon, Two Swords, and Rock Circus, and they had done it. They did what they did very well, and so that gave us the idea to do 18 different features where you would walk through. You would be taken back in time right away, and we recreated the main features of the Beatles' success, like Hamburg, like Matthew Street, the Merseybeat office, and of course, because of the Albert Dock, we could recreate a cavern club that we could do live music in, and then after we did that, we took people in. We had we've got our Abbey Road studio there, and it goes into. We had to cram 2 years into one section, and that was the crazy years, 65 and 66, because they did so much recording, the films, touring, so we had to cram that, and then we went into this open air from the black and white area into the psychedelic area, which included Sgt. Pepper, Magical Mystery Tour, and a real yellow submarine for the kids to walk through with real fish swimming past the portholes. And so that was our idea, which we achieved.
So you put that together, you're happy with it, you look back, and then day one, the doors open. What then?
It's a critical success from day one. Everybody loves it. They're saying, oh, you've done a great job. Would you believe in 1990 a recession started? On top of that, Lockerbie had just happened. The Americans said, I'm not going over there. And the first Iraq war started. So we opened to that. So the international visitors didn't come, so we were relying on
that's
Europe.
what you needed.
So we were relying. So we didn't achieve our figures, our forecasts for 2 to 3 years.
But when that 2 to 3 year period was up, then the momentum started
getting 150,000 a year.
Wow!
And it went on and on and on, and
And where are you now? You eventually sold it on, did you?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, it got big. It got too big, and so in 2000. I mean, we expanded quite a bit of it. Didn't change a lot of it, but we expanded quite a bit. 2001, a new owner came along, Cliff Cooper, who owned Orange Amplifiers. He started.
Oh yeah. I've interviewed Cliff.
And he's a a massive Beatles fan, and he had John Lennon's. He'd bought John Lennon's glasses, so he put them in. And so Cliff and I got on really well. But eventually, we had a couple of partners who we didn't get on with. And in the end, Cliff basically said to me, Mike, I want to get out. And he was the major partner. And so he could say, I want to sell. I didn't want to sell because, I was a minor shareholder. And with those shares, Bernie and I were getting... nice dividends every year, and I would have liked to have handed my shares to my kids. But
sure.
Cliff went, no, it's all going. And by the way, we've been made an offer we can't refuse by Mersey Travel.
Oh, right.
And we went, Mersey Travel? What are they doing in tourism? Oh, well, they've got the ferries, and they've got the submarine over the water. Anyway, we didn't argue because the money was okay. And so... we sold out in 2006. No, a bit later. Anyway, but we have a good relationship with the Beatles Story, and then 2 years ago we wrote a book.
Right.
The book's brilliant, by the way.
Of how we did it, I mean, we never thought we would do a book, because we're not authors, but because of...
See, I love that. Everything that I'm hearing about you, and we did this, we're not this, and we're not this. Well, you are exactly that. The book that you're writing about that's exactly what you are.
I know, but we don't see it. You see,
there's a bit of imposter syndrome going on.
But we were there, and it's kind of we knew them, and so we're not blasé about them because.
No, but to me, it's everything was the kind of the stars aligned there for everything you did, as far as I can see. And it was meant
really
to be.
Weird how it
happened.
Everything just fell into place. We were at the right place at the right time, I think.
So I can tell you being the kind of person that you are, 2006 onwards, what do you do now in order to satisfy your need of needing to do things?
Just being in a band.
You're still in a band now then?
I did.
Excuse me, I need to interrupt. I saw them playing last week. Mike is absolutely an astonishing musician. Absolutely brilliant.
So he's nodding his head for that again anyway,
isn't he?
Pack it in with all this modesty stuff, will you? Man, you're a great guy.
I've been singing for 60 years, and it comes very, very natural to me. In the 70s, I was the compere and entertainment manager in a big cabaret club in Liverpool, Russell's. And so I worked 6 nights a week with the likes of Tommy Cooper, Ken Dodd, Olivia Newton-John, Bob Monkhouse every week. So I'm working with these big stars every week, and that gave me another side, a big confidence, you see.
Yeah.
So on stage, you know, I can be an ad-libber. I'm not a comedian, but I'm a reasonable ad-libber. So when we sold out, I was in a band called Persuader with Brian Saxophone Jones, and some other good musicians, and we used to play all around town. And then eventually that finished, and I joined a rock and roll band called Jukebox Eddies. And we were like at Cooper's, you know, and all the other places. But I expanded it just because I'm who I am. I took it out, and we got on the rock and roll circuit around the country, and we were travelling, you know, doing like 150 gigs a year around Liverpool and around the country. And eventually now I'm down to doing, you know, 50 gigs a year or so. Yeah. And the name of the band is now Mike Byrne and the Sun Rockers.
Are you okay with that, Bernie, or do you say, hang on a sec, can we not just do the grass? Is it?
Well, he has to do the grass as well. No, you just get some days off. I'm okay. I go to some of the venues. Some of them, I like to dance. I've always done dancing. I went to ballroom dancing when I was a kid, and then gradually on to jive and formation dancing and things like that. So if they're doing a rock and roll gig, I quite like to go, providing I can find somebody I can jive with, and they don't throw me all over, you know, not over their heads or anything like that. So I don't mind. I did swear I'd never go out with anybody in a group again after
after the Beatles.
I said, oh, that's it. They're all the same. They're all fickle, you know.
I have a nice story about one day I'm working for my dad, and Paul ran down the steps of the shop, and he went, Mike, Granada's coming to film us at lunchtime, and I need 4 black things to wear on stage, because by that time Brian Epstein had said, get rid of the leathers, you've got to look good on stage, you can't swear on stage anymore, no eating on stage, you've got to look good. So I said, oh, God, the only 4 things I've got are black short-sleeved sweaters. Right. He said, they'll do, grabbed them, ran out and never paid me for them.
And they're immortalised, because that video is on YouTube.
That video.
That's the one I showed you last week.
It's where they're singing Some Other Guy. Yeah.
And at the end of it, somebody shouts out, "We want Pete."
Listen, unfortunately, we're out of time on this, and I really do mean that with sincerity, because I've so enjoyed that hour. But what I'd like to extend an invite to you here, because, you know, when you talk about you'd ended up being a compere in the cabaret scene, I've always wanted to do some stuff on that, and I'd be more than happy for you to come in and tell us about some of the people that you worked with back in the day. I would love to do that. Yeah. Guys, thank you so much for coming in. I'll never call you Winters again. I do apologise. Bernie, thank you so much indeed. Chris, what a marvellous contribution to the show today. You know what I mean? It's great when you don't say anything.
Absolutely.
She's marvellous. Right, okay, we are coming up towards midday. Got the news and sports headlines coming up. Around about 12:30, we'll catch up with Kerry Williams to give us the latest show business gossip.